Have you ever wondered why the gentle, sensitive, and compassionate souls always seem to be drawn into relationships that leave them drained? Why do those who carry light in their hearts keep gravitating toward those who live in darkness, as if some invisible thread keeps pulling them into the same dance again and again? From Jung's perspective, these encounters are never random. They are collisions between two layers of the unconscious, two inner worlds calling to be seen so that both can understand themselves. The empath carries the light, but it is a light that has never learned to see itself. The narcissist carries the darkness, but it is a darkness too afraid of being exposed, so it wears the mask of light. When these two poles meet, a profound psychological reaction is set in motion. The empath's light shines into the narcissist's darkness, awakening their buried fragments, while the narcissist's darkness forces the empath to confront what they have long tried to forget, their own shadow: the fear of abandonment, the hunger to be loved, and the anger they never dared to acknowledge. The attraction between them is not pure love, but the pull of two unintegrated halves, light that has not yet turned inward, and darkness that has never been understood. They recognize each other not by logic, but by energy. One feels seen, the other feels redeemed. Yet in that very moment, the spiral begins. For neither truly loves the other, they are each seeking the lost half of themselves. Thus, the bond between the empath and the narcissist becomes an unconscious ritual of the soul, where each tries to heal what is missing within, yet through confusion and pain. When this bond begins to crack, the empath is often stunned. They cannot comprehend how something once so radiant can turn cold overnight. The narcissist, once the bringer of magic, now reveals layer after layer of mask, one for seduction, one for control, one for hiding from the self. Yet the truth is, those masks only exist because the empath once believed in them. For when you desperately want to see the good in someone, you unconsciously become the mirror that helps them preserve their illusion. The narcissist needs that gaze to exist. The empath needs that faith to feel meaningful. And so both sustain the performance. One acts to be loved, the other loves to keep the act alive. But every play must end. Eventually, the empath's light runs out, no longer enough to feed the narcissist's illusion. Then the truth begins to leak through the cracks, small lies, contradictions, unexplainable coldness. And the empath faces the greatest shock, realizing they were deceived not only by the other, but by themselves. That shock marks the beginning of awakening. For when all illusions collapse, only one raw question remains. If my light was truly as strong as I believed, why did I wander into their darkness? The answer doesn't lie in the other person. It lies within, in the places the empath never dared to look. This is the empath's own darkness, the shadow they have suppressed all their life. Denied anger, the fear of abandonment, the craving for validation, and the self-worth suffocated by the need to be good. When they finally turn toward that shadow, something extraordinary happens. The narcissist's mask begins to fall. Because the narcissist can only exist as long as you keep reflecting back the image they need to see. When you stop playing the healer, when you dare to shine light into the very darkness within you, the one that once drew you to them, they have nothing left to hold on to. The light born of your awareness becomes something they cannot endure. And that is the moment the final mask falls, not just theirs, but yours. The final mask is not the one you peel from the narcissist's face. It is the one you remove from your own. The mask of blind goodness, of unconditional love for someone incapable of loving, of light that shines only outward and never inward. When you dare to illuminate your own darkness, the narcissist is exposed without you needing to expose them. You don't have to fight, prove, or shout who they are. Your peace and clarity become the silent verdict they cannot bear. That is why this journey is called the final mask, because it is not about dethroning the narcissist, but about ending the illusion within yourself. Once you see yourself clearly, with no part left in shadow, you become free, and in that freedom the truth reveals itself effortlessly. From here, the real journey begins, the journey where the empath learns to light their own darkness, to see the world clearly, instead of lighting the world to avoid their darkness. And when they do, the entire power game of the narcissist dissolves, for true light needs no mirror to shine. It simply needs to exist. Chapter 1. The final mask of the empath. When everything grows quiet, when the empath steps back from the spiral, a silent emptiness opens. No more messages, no more explanations, no more endless conversations trying to make the other person understand. Only stillness remains, the kind that doesn't feel like sorrow, but like a room freshly swept after a storm. At first they feel hollow, but beneath that hollowness, a question begins to rise. If I loved sincerely and gave everything, why am I so exhausted? The empath once believed their strength lived in tolerance, endurance, and always seeing the good in others. They trusted that if they just loved enough, if they kept their light steady long enough, everything would change. Then they discover the most unsettling truth. Kindness can also be a mask. Not a mask to hide others, but to hide themselves, to cover anger, hurt, and the yearning to be seen. As children, many empaths learned that love comes with conditions. To be loved, they had to behave, yield, and endure. They became the good child, not by instinct, but for survival. Over time, that goodness hardened into a thin armor over the soul. They learned to scan others' emotions like radar, sensing anger, sadness, disappointment in advance, and adjusting themselves to fit. In that process, they lost the boundary between me and them. Kindness became a role, a performance so flawless, they themselves mistook it for who they really were. When they meet the narcissist, the performance is pushed to its limit. The narcissist doesn't merely need love. They need someone who believes in their potential, who believes the story they tell themselves. With their fine-tuned intuition, the empath senses the wounds beneath the mask and assumes their mission is to heal. They enter the relationship less as a partner and more as a savior. They don't realize that in trying to save the other, they are running from their own terror, the fear that if they aren't needed, they will be abandoned. This is the empath's final mask, the mask of being so good that they forget they are human. It is wrapped in light, but it clutches inside it the darkness of fear and guilt. When they say, "I forgive you," they often mean, "Please don't leave me." When they say, "I understand," they often mean, "I'm afraid of being misunderstood." When they say, "I love you unconditionally," they sometimes mean, "Please stay, even as I fall apart." The painful truth is this: kindness does not always come from love. Sometimes it comes from trauma. And because empaths don't want to face their own wounds, they use kindness as a cover language. They believe that by giving, they will escape their inner emptiness. But that emptiness cannot be filled by another person. It can only be known, touched, and loved by themselves. Jung said, "No one becomes whole without confronting their own darkness." For the empath, this means learning to love the parts that are not easy, their anger, their needs, their boundaries, their fatigue. By rejecting those parts, they hand over the reins of their life to others. The narcissist enters not merely because they are bad, but because they sense that inner vacancy, a place to take root. The better the empath tries to be, the easier they are to exploit, because their goodness has no edges. They think boundaries are selfish, not realizing that lacking boundaries is the true cruelty to themselves. Kindness without boundaries becomes a moralized form of self-destruction. They hurt and tell themselves, "I'm strong." They are betrayed and say, "I understand." They collapse and still force a smile to prove their love is noble. In that struggle, they forget that real love needs no proof. It doesn't need to be sanctified to be valid. It only needs to be lived truthfully. And to love truthfully, they must remove the mask. But unmasking is not gentle. It is painful, like peeling tender skin for new growth. The empath must accept that they too have a shadow, the part that wants to be loved, attended to, treated fairly. The part that can be angry, can say no, can let go without guilt. The part they once called selfish is in fact the part that keeps them alive. Awakening begins when they stop trying to be the good one and start becoming the real one. Their light changes quality, no longer flashy. It becomes deep, steady, substantive. It seeks nothing to prove. It simply exists. And at that moment, the narcissist's game ends. A narcissist cannot manipulate someone who has faced their own darkness. Their power lies in making you ashamed of what you hide. When you have nothing to hide, their power dissolves. They cannot induce guilt because you have learned to forgive yourself. They cannot breed doubt because you have traced your fear to its root. They cannot bait reactions because you no longer need to prove your worth. The empath is no longer an awakened victim, but a conscious bearer of light. This light is not for shining on others, but for illuminating themselves whenever their darkness returns. It is a mature, humble, durable light, the light of someone who knows no one is perfect, and real love never demands perfection. From there, they regard past relationships through different eyes, not with bitterness or blame, but with understanding. They see the narcissist as a reflection of the parts they once disowned. They recognize that being hurt was not a punishment, but a rite of passage, one that forced them to grow in authentic light beyond illusion. They understand that the final mask was never on anyone else's face. It was on the face they saw in the mirror every morning. And when that mask falls, what they see is not weakness or naivete, but a whole human being, light and shadow, love and anger, boundaries and freedom. Then they no longer need to expose the narcissist. Their presence does that on its own. True light never has to prove itself. It simply appears and darkness reveals itself. The empath realizes that true victory is not making the narcissist suffer, but no longer letting the narcissist define them. They begin to live differently. They no longer save anyone. They listen and honor others' journeys without carrying them. They no longer give to be loved. They give from wholeness. They no longer keep silent out of fear of conflict. They are silent because they don't need noise to validate themselves. Bit by bit, they reclaim their energy, the energy once split by the game of light and shadow. At this point, the final mask is not just the story of the empath and the narcissist. It becomes a symbol for every human being. All of us wear some kind of mask. The strong one, the humble one, the self-sacrificing one, the idealist. But there comes a time when the soul will no longer allow us to live under costume. It will make us fall, break, and lose, forcing us to choose between continuing to perform or daring to be real. The empath chooses real. And in that choice, they find what they had searched for in others for years: peace. Peace does not mean everything is fine. It means that even when darkness returns, they know they carry light in their hands. Not the light of illusion, but the light that has journeyed through night and knows the way home. That is the final mask, the moment the empath no longer needs to play healer, because they have become what they were seeking all along: a whole soul, unafraid of darkness, with nothing to hide, nothing to prove, simply present. Chapter 2. Lighting the darkness within. There is a threshold every empath must cross, the moment when the outer world stops answering. No one left to blame, no one left to save, no storyline left to keep performing. Only themselves, bare, silent, full of unanswered questions. This is the doorway of darkness. Contrary to our fears, darkness is not the enemy. It is the teacher waiting until we are brave enough to enter our own classroom. As the empath begins to light the darkness within, they discover a paradox. True light isn't born from fleeing darkness, but from touching it. Healing doesn't come when we say, "I'm fine," but when we dare to say, "I have never truly been fine, and I want to know why." At this stage, platitudes lose meaning and philosophies feel distant. Only the breath remains proof that no matter the pain, we are still here, and that is enough to begin. In that stillness, the empath sees what they had avoided, themselves when they are not the good one. When they stop pleasing, they feel guilty. When they refuse to help, they feel afraid. When they say no, they feel like a traitor. Gradually, they learn that this guilt is not a sign of wrongdoing. It is a sign that freedom is sprouting. Every no to others can be a yes to the soul. And the soul, long starved, begins to feed on the energy of honesty. They learn darkness doesn't weaken them. It reminds them that true light needs roots. Light is not a forced smile or blind benevolence. Light is the capacity to remain centered amid chaos. It is knowing one can be angry without losing compassion, being willing to let go when love becomes a chain, looking straight at the truth even when it shatters a cherished image. Going deeper, they face a sobering reality. They once used kindness to avoid feeling their own power. Softness became a comfortable mask to escape the responsibility of self-leadership. Because when we are truly strong, we cannot keep blaming others. When we are truly awake, we cannot pretend not to see. The scariest thing is realizing we had power all along and never dared to use it. The empath's darkness is not cruelty. It is emotional immaturity, being stuck in roles like good child, gentle friend, saving lover, because those roles protect them from the burden of living truthfully. Entering darkness means giving up roles, accepting that love sometimes requires loss, and that genuine compassion never excludes boundaries. Then something miraculous happens. They start speaking truth, not to win, but to be free. I'm tired. I need space. I disagree. I was wrong. For an empath, these simple sentences are like learning a new language. Each time they tell the truth, they reclaim a fragment of energy once stolen by silence. They see that honesty doesn't break connection, it breaks illusion. And in that breaking, the real can be born. One of the deepest lessons emerges. No one is coming to save them. And that is not a tragedy, but the beginning of power. When they stop waiting to be understood, they begin to understand themselves. When they stop demanding unconditional love from those who cannot give it, they learn to grant it to themselves. Loneliness is no longer a punishment, but a rite of transformation. In solitude, they become companions to their own soul. As they grow familiar with this quiet, what once hurt becomes a door to freedom. They see the world differently. Those who harmed them are no longer villains, but mirrors reflecting lessons they needed. Resentment gives way to awareness. They realize everything had a purpose, every wound a sign pointing toward their true center. Now, light changes essence. It is no longer cast outward to be seen. It's felt inward like a low, steady current. It's not the glare of display, but the glow of understanding, calm and silent courage. Having crossed darkness, they feel no pride in being healed, only the humility of a traveler who once was lost and now knows the way back. At this stage, the empath learns to sit with the feelings they avoided. They let tears fall without rushing to wipe them. They allow anger to surface without hiding it. They let loneliness pass without plugging it with another person. They discover emotions themselves are not dangerous. Only the refusal to feel them brings collapse. When they stop running, darkness softens into soil. From that soil, another kind of light grows, the light weighted with truth. The truth that they were wrong to equate love with endurance. The truth that not everyone wants healing. The truth that compassion can morph into a subtle arrogance when we believe we can save someone, we deny their path. The truth that sometimes the greatest act of love is to leave, and to leave not as punishment, but out of respect for two souls trapped in illusion. Then their light becomes different, not reflective, but sourced. They no longer need to be seen, understood, or validated as good. Their light simply is, like a lamp at midnight, unafraid of the night, knowing darkness gives it reason to shine. If the narcissist tries to return, the empath now sees them not with a wounded heart, but with the eyes of awareness. They no longer see ex-betrayer, but a soul wrestling with its own shadow. They are not angry, but they do not rescue. They stand still, and their light, the light of recognition, makes everything visible. Darkness cannot survive where everything is seen. The empath's true light doesn't blind. It makes the false unable to persist. It doesn't annihilate darkness. It liberates it. At that point, the narcissist either withdraws or collapses, not because the empath wins, but because the counterfeit structure of power cannot withstand the presence of an awakened soul. This is the turning point. They no longer use light against darkness. They use awareness to transform darkness into light. That is the essence of healing. There is no victory, no enemy, only transmutation. They understand that every time they dare to face fear, a piece of their soul returns. Every time they forgive themselves, old energy is released. Every time they stop trying to change others, they become freer. As this unfolds, the world around them changes, not because others change, but because they no longer react as before. What once caused pain now prompts reflection. What once incited proving now evokes a quiet smile. They begin to live by presence, no longer pulled by other people's emotional tides. In the end, the empath sees that lighting the darkness was never an outward act. It is a homecoming, not to withdraw from the world, but to step out of the illusion that they must choose between light and shadow. When they can hold both within, they become whole. In that wholeness, they are no longer drawn to repetitive relationships, no longer need others to mirror their worth, no longer fear losing someone to feel complete. They are no longer yesterday's empath, easily wounded, easily loving, easily forgetting themselves. They are the awakened empath, one who knows that compassion without wisdom is self-destruction, and wisdom without compassion is cruelty. They stand between those poles, carrying both light and shadow, knowing when to open, when to keep distance, when to love, and when to leave. This is true illumination, not through effort, but through understanding. They no longer need to shine on anyone else. Their very presence is the source of light. Darkness ceases to be a threat and becomes an ally, reminding them that whenever their light dims, they need only turn inward to find the fire again. Chapter 3, The Unmasking of the Narcissist. When the empath's light stops reaching outward for validation and turns inward to illuminate the self, a strange phenomenon begins. The narcissist who lives by reflection suddenly stands exposed. Nothing external has changed, yet the energy between them is no longer the same. The empath's stillness dissolves the stage on which the narcissist once performed, and for the first time, there is no audience. The narcissist functions like a magician thriving on collective illusion. They can charm, manipulate, persuade, but only as long as someone believes in the show. They live by controlling image, not only the image they project to others, but the image they strive to believe about themselves. They cannot bear the gap between who I am and who I want to be seen as. That gap is an abyss they must fill with praise, attention, love, or the fear of others. When the empath steps out of the play, truth enters like daylight into a long-sealed room. The empath is not trying to expose the narcissist. They simply stop reacting, stop explaining, stop participating. It is that withdrawal of energy which reveals the narcissist's true emptiness, the place where nothing remains but the terror of being forgotten. What the narcissist fears most is not being hated, but not being seen. For them, existence is bound to reflection. They cannot be unless someone is looking. They inhabit an artificial ego, a splendid persona assembled from fragments of admiration. When the empath, the central mirror, turns inward, that persona begins to crumble. Carl Jung observed that one cannot exist without an image of oneself. For the narcissist, this becomes a curse. They have no self. They have only image. When that image cracks, it feels like dying, not a bodily death, but the death of egoic illusion. This is their nigredo, the black stage in which everything that ever defined them disintegrates. Yet, instead of embracing it as the opening to rebirth, they resist at all costs. Blame, projection, story, bending anything to keep the old image alive. What they fail to grasp is this: the light of awareness cannot be extinguished by words. When the empath truly sees them without emotional entanglement, that gaze becomes a true mirror, one that reflects essence, not illusion. It terrifies the narcissist because, for the first time, they cannot control what they see in someone else's eyes. And then the unmasking begins. It doesn't erupt with noise, no theatrical climax, no "I told you so." It unfolds in tiny, nearly silent moments, a lie that no longer lands, a seductive gesture that no longer works. A guilt tactic recognized for what it is. Each time the narcissist tries to manipulate, they're met by the calm quiet of someone who knows the game. That quiet is the blade that slices the mask, not with violence, but with truth. When the mask falls, what appears is not a demon, but a contracted soul, a child trapped in the fear of abandonment, a shame too heavy to bear, and the helplessness of not knowing how to love. It is the starkest moment, where their power dissolves and only the emptiness they've been fleeing remains. But caution, exposure is not the same as awakening. The narcissist may touch this pain for an instant and then bolt back into defenses, denial, derision, victim, playing. Facing oneself requires courage they do not yet possess. They may feign remorse, feign insight, but the motive is still control. Even confession can morph into a new mask, the mask of the one who has changed. Thus, unmasking is rarely a single event. It is a series of fractures over time, one layer at a time. If the empath is sufficiently awake, they will not be trapped by pity. They understand that witnessing the narcissist's pain does not obligate them to save the narcissist. The light of awareness is not for healing the other. It is for anchoring oneself in truth. They recognize no one can rescue a person who is still in love with their mask. Rather than winning, the empath chooses understanding, and in understanding, transcendence. They no longer need to prove who is right or wrong. They have stepped out of the power dynamic. Without an observer, the narcissist's structure of illusion starts to collapse. The more they grasp for control, the more their emptiness shows. The more control they chase, the less they have. At depth, a classic Jungian phenomenon is occurring. In antiodromia, when any extreme, pushed far enough, transforms into its opposite. The narcissist's false ego, built to escape weakness, ultimately disintegrates because of that weakness. And the empath, once cast in the role of the weak one, becomes strongest not by fighting, but by understanding. A profound paradox governs this path. You cannot truly expose the narcissist until you no longer want to expose them. When the need to prove evaporates, your energy leaves the game, and that very withdrawal makes the mask fall. The narcissist cannot perform without an audience. Without reaction, they lose the role. Without the role, they lose the ego. In that emptiness, real light does its work, revealing not by argument, but by presence. Having passed through this phase, the empath no longer sees the world in the binary of good people versus bad people. They see that every soul has a shadow, though not everyone is willing to enter it. They grasp that narcissists are not evil by preference, but terrified of truth. They also grasp that real love cannot be forced. It exists only where there is courage to see oneself clearly. From here, the empath is no longer a victim illuminated by light, but a carrier of wise light. This light not only shines for others, it knows when to dim, so others can discover their own vision. The empath is free not because they overcame the narcissist, but because they are no longer defined by the narcissist's existence. As for the narcissist, if they can endure collapse without fleeing, if they can stand amid the ashes of the old image without rushing to erect a new one, then, in that very instant, they too have a chance at rebirth. At the end of exposure, only truth remains, and truth always carries the capacity to heal, even the most lost. Most, however, never arrive there, because they fear the very silence the empath has learned to love. This is the tragedy and the justice of the universe. True light does not punish darkness. It simply makes darkness recognize itself. When the unmasking is complete, there are no fireworks, no triumphant finale, no applause. There is only stillness in which the empath walks on with a quiet heart, while the narcissist is left with the echo of their own voice. One steps into real light, the other wanders the hall of mirrors where every reflection is themselves and no one looks back. This is not revenge. It is balance. When the empath learns to light their own darkness, the universe need do nothing more. Every mask will fall, every lie will burn, and every soul will have to face itself sooner or later. And so the story does not end with who wins and who loses, but with the final truth. Real light needs no proof. It only needs to exist, and in its existence, every illusion dissolves. Chapter 4. The Aftermath. When truth becomes the mirror. When the storm has passed, the empath does not emerge in glory, but in quiet. There are no victory cheers, no prizes for the tear-soaked years. Only a strange sensation remains, as if the world has changed, and yet nothing has changed. They realize the only true transformation is in how they now see. Once you have walked through darkness, you can no longer look at life with old eyes. After the mask falls, the world does not grow brighter, it grows more honest. And honesty, to a soul accustomed to living through reflections, is a test. The empath begins to understand that without the narcissist to mirror their own shadow, they must face the true mirror, truth itself. Here begins the real healing, not the search for light, but learning to live in light without having to prove they deserve it. At this stage, they learn what Jung called the recentering of the soul, when the ego, shattered by ordeal, is restructured around a new axis, the self, the true I, that stands beyond both light and shadow. There is no one left to blame, no one left to save, no one left to convince. Only a quiet presence remains where personhood, pain, memory, and soul converge into a single being. Many mistake this phase for the end. In truth, it is dawn after the soul's long night. With light's return, everything is clearer and barer. There is no illusion left to lean on, no role to hide behind. The empath discovers that truth does not only liberate, it obliges maturity. Once you know, you cannot pretend not to. This maturity is not learned from books. It's etched into bone. Seeing someone manipulate, they do not judge. They see fear performing. Seeing someone feign strength, they recognize a silhouette of their former self. The border between them and me softens into a continuous field of awareness. Everything is reflection, everyone a mirror, and truth the only light that cannot be manipulated. The empath begins to live differently. They no longer strive to understand everyone, they simply observe. They no longer try to heal the world. They keep their own heart clear so the world has a place to reflect light. They no longer ask, "What must I do to be loved?" but, "How true can I live while keeping my heart kind?" Actions become simpler yet carry deeper weight because they arise from the center, not the wound. From this center, their love changes too. It is no longer the love of attachment, but the love of awareness. They love without needing to possess. They care without needing to save. They forgive without needing to forget. They understand that love is not fusion, but coexistence. Real love never demands self-erasure. It invites each to return to themselves and share from wholeness. A clear sign they have traveled far is serenity in adversity, not numbness, but trust in the deeper order of the universe. They see that everything that happened, pain, betrayal, separation, were rivers carrying them to the sea. They stop seeking justice in others' actions and find justice in the cadence of truth itself. At this point, the empath is like a pillar of light, not because they beam, but because they stand. In a noisy world of masks, their stillness becomes the most powerful reflection. Those still living in illusion are unsettled by that silence, for it reveals the noise within. But those seeking a way will recognize it as an invitation. True light does not persuade, it attracts. One day they look back on the journey, the years of crying, trying to understand, pleading, loving to exhaustion, and they smile. Not a proud smile, but the smile of comprehension. Everything was necessary. Without the narcissist, they might never have seen their own shadow. Without betrayal, they might never have learned honesty with their soul. Without pain, they might never have known unconditional love, the kind that arises not from lack, but from understanding. In Jung's language, this is individuation, the soul becoming one with itself. In the language of the heart, we might call it the freedom of awareness. When you no longer need anyone to define you, you become untouchable, not because you cannot be hurt, but because you no longer battle. You see, there is no one to defeat. only something to understand. Now the empath is like one who has left the labyrinth. They do not return to prove they escaped, nor to drag anyone out. They stand outside, lamp in hand, ready to light the way for those who choose to walk. They know no awakening can be forced. Every awakening is voluntary, and they honor that. From here, they begin a new life, not built on roles, not on healing or becoming better, but on truthfulness. They speak less, and each word carries weight. They love fewer people, and each relationship runs deeper. They need fewer things, and what they choose, they live fully. They become living proof of a simple truth. Light is not a destination, but the natural state that appears when you stop obscuring yourself. Thus, the circle closes not in repetition, but in elevation. Every true ending is a form of expansion. Living from the soul's center, they are no longer pulled into karmic relationships. They begin to draw kindred souls, people who don't need saving but can walk together. They are no longer the world's energy bearer, but a steady presence that radiates balance within it. This is the legacy of the journey. When darkness is understood, when light needs no proof, when love is no longer a reflex, but a choice, truth becomes the mirror. A mirror that reflects not anyone's face, but everyone's soul. And in that mirror, the empath finally recognizes what they had sought all their life. There is nothing to forgive, nothing to forget, nothing to prove. Everything that ever happened was the universe's way of helping them remember who they are. A soul that has walked through darkness, learned to love the unloved parts, and become the very light they once went searching for. Chapter 5. The Sacred Mirror. When the empath meets their own shadow. In truth, the meeting between an empath and a narcissist isn't a rare phenomenon between two unusual personality types. It is a living metaphor for what all of us must face, the encounter with our own darkness. Within every person there is an empath part longing to love, understand, and connect, and there is a narcissist part, afraid, needing to be seen, obsessed with self-image. These two parts are not enemies. They are the poles of a single soul seeking its way back to wholeness. When we condemn the narcissist, we are in fact fighting the part of ourselves that has yet to be loved. That part may be small, hidden beneath humility, or disguised as kindness. But if we look closely, we'll see the moments when we too manipulated to be loved, wore a mask to be accepted, or responded with silence or control when we felt hurt. The difference lies only in degree and awareness. The empath is conscious of their pain, the narcissist is not. But at root, both are seeking the same thing, the feeling of existence. Carl Jung said, "No one is exempt from their shadow." We differ only in whether we dare to recognize it. Perhaps the encounter between empath and narcissist is simply the soul's way of forcing us to see the part we still deny. When the empath loves a narcissist, they are not only loving a person, they are loving their own shadow, the fear of being forgotten, the hunger for recognition, the anger long suppressed. And when that love collapses, they do not merely lose someone, they face the part within that has been hidden for so long. As for the narcissist, when they meet the empath, they too confront what they cannot bear, the reflection of the soul. The empath's light is so clear, it shows them what they try to reject: weakness, shame, meaninglessness. They resent the empath not because the empath has done anything wrong, but because the empath makes them feel real, and reality for an ego sustained by illusion is intolerable. Seen more deeply, this encounter is not a tragedy but a spiritual rite. An ancient initiation the human soul must undergo to meet its opposite in order to reintegrate as one. The empath thinks they are learning compassion, but they are really being taught boundaries. The narcissist thinks they are learning control, but they are being invited to feel. Each is the other's lesson, and when the lesson completes, both are compelled to change whether they realize it or not. If the empath does not learn, they will repeat the pattern, seeking wounded souls to love, giving until empty, hoping love will save. If the narcissist refuses to learn, they will keep seeking new mirrors until all of them shatter and they must face themselves in a blank glass. The universe punishes no one. It simply repeats the lesson until we understand. The truth is, Within every empath lives a fragment of the narcissist, and within every narcissist there is an unlived fragment of the empath. That is why these poles attract. They feel they belong together not because of romantic destiny, but because opposite energies seek to unify. The human soul longs for wholeness, and wholeness is impossible if we accept only our light. With this understanding, the empath stops asking, "Why did they hurt me?" and begins asking, "What did I learn about myself through them?" This question is the key that opens the final door of awareness. When we stop seeing others as perpetrators and start seeing them as mirrors, we step into a new level of freedom. Freedom does not come from cutting off, but from understanding. Not forgiveness to forget, but forgiveness to see. This is when the empath becomes a watcher of the soul, no longer fused with the role of light or shadow. They understand they can be both gentle and firm, compassionate and decisive, loving and able to leave. They do not try to be better, they become more real. And in that reality, everything turns transparent. Love, fear, loss, all are different forms of the same energy, the energy of awareness. Then the world changes. We no longer see the narcissist as the bad one, but as a soul trapped in a game they do not know how to stop. We no longer see ourselves as victims, but as people learning to love without losing ourselves. We realize the encounter was never a mistake. It was a necessary turn in the road back to the source of love, where light and shadow no longer oppose each other, but blend to form the authentic human being. At that point, the empath no longer says, "I met a narcissist, but I met the part of me that needed to be seen." And when they can say that without trembling, without tears, only with gratitude, that is the sign the journey has come full circle. For in the end, empath and narcissist are two souls playing roles for the same human lesson. That true love is not light without darkness, but light strong enough to look at darkness without fear. Chapter 6, The Collective Shadow, the world that mirrors our inner split. There is a truth few dare to face. The world we live in is not separate from the human psyche, but a vast reflection of the collective unconscious. Every turmoil, every war, every decaying system, every powerful narcissist out there, all are projections of what remains unhealed within humanity itself. We don't merely live in society, we are society. Each person, a single drop in the human ocean, carries traces of the common current, what Carl Jung called the collective shadow. The frightening part isn't that this darkness exists, but that it is being celebrated. In a world driven by image, where people are judged by what they display rather than what they are, the persona, the social mask becomes currency. We no longer live to be true, we live to be seen. Everyone learns to say the right things, do the acceptable things, and feel the sanctioned feelings. Truth, our emotions, fears, instincts, and wounds, is pushed down into the depths, where it becomes raw, seething, and dense. There, the collective shadow is born. Look closely, and modern society is an enlarged version of the empath-narcissist dynamic. The media is the omnipotent narcissist, wrapped in light, inspiration, and motivation, yet addicted to attention, devoted to admiration, manipulating mass emotion to maintain power. Humanity, the sensitive hearts, becomes the collective empath, absorbing, reacting, hurting, then forgiving, giving, and consuming the very stories they mistake for truth. In a performance culture, the more tightly darkness is hidden, the more powerful it becomes. Disowned feelings don't disappear. They change form. Fear becomes ambition. Shame turns into judgment. Repressed anger becomes subtle violence. While we pride ourselves on progress, we delve deeper into a maze of illusion where the brightest lights shine from stages that obscure the soul. Jung wrote, "The more a society moralizes, the more it loses its soul." The harder we try to appear good, the more we repress natural instincts, animal nature, desire, anger, and the more those repressed forces return in destructive forms. The collective shadow isn't a demon outside us. It is the result of a collective inner split when humanity chooses the comfort of illusion over the courage of awareness. Observe our age. Everyone wants to be good, but few want to be real. We speak of compassion, yet fear genuine vulnerability. We discuss healing, yet are addicted to attention. We preach love, yet fear seeing our own cruelty. Thus the sacred is commodified. Love packaged into dating tactics, spirituality marketed as a campaign, compassion converted into a hashtag. This is how the collective shadow operates. It does not oppose light. It learns to imitate it. In this picture, the narcissist is not only an individual, it is the energy of civilization. A civilization that prizes success over understanding, speed over depth, noise over stillness. A world where I think, therefore I am, has been replaced with I post, therefore I exist. In such a world, empaths, those who feel deeply, honestly, and can touch the essence of life, become strangers in humanity's own house. The paradox is here. They are also the immune system of the world. As the collective shadow spreads, empaths feel it first in their bodies, their sleep, their inexplicable tears. They carry not only personal wounds, but the wounds of the age. Sensitive souls become conduits through which the collective darkness passes to be felt, understood, and eventually transmuted. But when they do not recognize this, they are crushed by the very role their soul entrusted to them. They absorb society's fear, wear the era's despair, and think it is all their own fault. Many empaths fall into depression not because they are weak, but because they are feeling for a world that has forgotten how to feel. Unless they learn to distinguish my pain from the pain of the collective, they will remain victims of their sacred gift. In Jungian terms, this is collective individuation, the process by which humanity, like an individual, must integrate its light and shadow. We are now compelled to face the collective unconscious: war, greed, hatred, prejudice, psychological violence, and indifference to one another's pain. These are not merely social issues, they are symptoms of a psyche cut off from its soul. While the collective shadow remains unintegrated, the world will keep generating narcissistic systems, power structures designed to sustain illusion. They may be called politics, corporations, media, even religion, but they share the same mechanism: control through image. Like the individual narcissist, these systems require attention to exist. They feed on fear, conflict, and our forgetfulness of who we truly are. And as in any toxic relationship, the more we try to appease them, the more they take. What then is the remedy? Not overthrowing the system, but awakening from the system within. When an individual shines light into their own darkness, they are doing the work of humanity. The collective shadow is active in each of us, in how we judge, in our quiet envy, in our fear of being forgotten. In those moments, we choose silence over truth. Every act of awareness is a point of light in humanity's invisible network. If the empath's gift is profound sensitivity, they are the gateway of collective awakening. But to serve that role, they must release the savior identity. The world does not need saving. It needs seeing. The collective shadow cannot be destroyed by niceness. It can only be transformed by awareness. When empaths learn to look at the world without judgment, while keeping their hearts open, they become mirrors of reconciliation between the poles, and in that mirror, humanity sees itself. The world today longs for such people, not merely good people, but real ones. People willing to face their own fear rather than blame others. People who understand that darkness is not an enemy, but a primal energy in need of rebirth. People who know anger can become courage, sorrow can mature into compassion, and silence can be the highest form of awareness. To gain that truth, we must pay the price of losing collective illusions. When you begin to see the world's falseness, a deep loneliness arises. It feels as though you live on a vast stage where everyone is acting and only you are real. Yet in that moment, you enter the field of the awakened souls who no longer belong to the crowd, but to the truth. And they, though few, are the ones holding the balance of this world. In ancient myth, when darkness spread, the universe did not send soldiers but bearers of quiet light. They fought not with weapons but with the frequency of consciousness. Each clear thought, honest act, and kind word opens a tiny crack in the night of the collective shadow. No noise is needed, no fame, only true presence. This is the empath's mission in our time, to become a mirror of awareness, not a mirror reflecting perfection, but an honest mirror where both light and shadow are seen without judgment. When they learn to stand in their center without dissolving into chaos, they become an axis for the world's rebalancing. If that sounds vague, remember, every great change in human history began with a small shift in awareness. When one person dares to love without possessing, to forgive without weakness, to speak truth without hatred, they shake the foundation of the collective shadow. Darkness cannot persist where honesty abides. As more empaths step out of the victim role and become observers, humanity's energy will shift. The rule of narcissistic systems will collapse not by attack, but by starvation, as there is no longer reactive energy to feed them. The new world is not born of revolution, but of the quiet inner transformation of people. Then we will see that the collective shadow is not something to fear, but something to hear. It is the cry of forgotten soul parts, abandoned energies pleading to be loved. When humanity can love the parts of itself that have not yet been loved, every system, every structure, every war will dissolve. Perhaps that is the final mask on a global scale, the mask of civilization. When humanity removes it, we do not become better, we become more authentic. No longer a synthetic light powered by fear, but the natural light of awareness, a light that needs no proof, only expression. For ultimately, the empath's journey is never purely personal. It is the journey of humanity through itself, from illusion to truth, from darkness to understanding, from reflection to presence. As they illuminate their own darkness, the whole world brightens with them. And that is the quiet miracle of consciousness. Chapter 7. The Age of Mirrors. How empaths are rebalancing the world's energy. There was a time when people believed the world was run by material power, weapons, money, authority, speed, and information. But the deeper we move into the century of data and noise, the clearer it becomes. Matter is only the visible crest of consciousness. Everything out there, from political upheaval and climate crisis to the collapse of relationships, is a physical expression of what's unfolding in the unseen depths of the collective mind. We are living in the age of mirrors, a time when the world is no longer merely a stage of events, but a field of reflection. Everything you see, beauty and breakdown, greed and love, failing systems and uprisings, is a mirror of the energy humanity carries within. In this mirrored world, empaths are the balancing points of energy, the souls with the capacity to tune the collective frequency through their depth of awareness. To grasp that role, we first have to face a truth few dare to touch. Earth is responding like a feeling organism. Every climate fluctuation, every pandemic, every global crisis is the heartbeat of a vast body struggling to re-establish energetic balance. For too long, humanity has lived like a mind severed from its body, consuming rather than harmonizing, controlling rather than feeling. And now the planet, like a fevered body, is mounting an inflammatory response to heal itself. On a subtler level, empaths are this planet's sensory nervous system. They feel climate change as tension in the chest, social injustice as a pain in the ribs, collective fear as pressure behind the eyes. They are the psychic neurons linking individual consciousness with the mind of the whole. If Earth is a body, empaths are the nerves that tremble with each shift in the planet's energy. Here is the paradox. Most empaths have yet to realize their sensitivity is not a curse, but a calling. They assume they are weak because they are easily moved, easily wounded, easily fatigued by harsh energies. In truth, that very sensitivity is the greatest instrument the universe placed in their hands to do what others cannot: transmute energy through awareness and love. Look closely and you'll see it. Whenever an empath holds pain without lashing out in hate, chooses understanding over revenge, or silence over noise. They are not merely processing personal emotion. They are transforming collective energy. They are alchemizing the low vibrations of hatred, fear, and shame into the higher frequencies of comprehension and compassion. A conscious empath can shift the entire field around them by presence alone. Carl Jung described this as individuation through the self's field, individuation that radiates. When a person reconciles their own light and shadow, that coherence ripples outward in synchronizing waves. Jung likened human beings to particles in a resonant system. When one particle stabilizes at a higher frequency, it can trigger an entrainment that helps the others tune themselves. This is the spiritual mechanism of collective evolution. That is why this era needs awakened empaths more than ever. The world does not need more expert debaters or louder slogans for peace. It needs people who can keep peace within themselves amid chaos. Peace is no longer a moral idea. It's a waveform, a transmissible frequency. When your interior is quiet, that field radiates like an electromagnetic aura, affecting everyone nearby without a single word. In quantum physics, we know that particles within a system can influence one another at a distance, quantum entanglement. Human consciousness is entangled in a similar way. When an empath heals, they are working not only for themselves, but for the network of awareness they belong to. Each time you forgive, you unfasten a knot in the collective soul. Each time you stop reacting, you interrupt a karmic loop in the larger system. To hold that frequency, empaths must enter a period of spiritual alchemy. This age has no room for naivete. Kindness without awareness is no longer enough. Love without boundaries saves no one. Like the old alchemists who turned lead into gold, empaths must learn to turn heavy energies into wisdom. Feeling is not enough. They must transmute. This transmutation doesn't happen through grand gestures, but in how they meet themselves daily. When they face fear without fleeing, say no without guilt, live truthfully even when misunderstood, they are helping to retune humanity's frequency. Every conscious act is an energetic right. And so we come to the essence of the age of mirrors, a world where everything reflects consciousness. The narcissist is no longer just an individual. They are the emblem of systems that cannot look into a mirror. The empath who dares to look within becomes a clear pane, and light passing through them is no longer distorted. When enough clear mirrors exist, the world changes not by force, but by resonance. Remember, the light of awareness is not always pleasant. When empaths truly awaken, the world may look less pretty at first. They see what others avoid. Deceit in love, control disguised as religion, emptiness behind success, and fear repeating itself in every civilization. They realize humanity has not truly evolved. We've just upgraded our tools for hiding fear. Many empaths then enter a dark enlightenment, a lucidity inside shadow. They lose faith in appearances, feel the world is counterfeit, question the very value of goodness. Yet in the midst of this crisis, something miraculous occurs. They discover that true light does not come from belief, but from knowing. Not blind faith in the good, but clear awareness that both good and evil are parts of a single whole learning to recognize itself. At the deepest level, empaths in this era are not only perceivers, they are carriers of the soul, memory of humankind. They remember without knowing how epochs, when people lived in harmony with nature, cultures where soul was not severed from body. They carry in their DNA an imprint of a lost balance. Their sensitivity is not just emotion, it is a genetic remembrance of light. They ache not only for the present, but because they remember a wholeness the world forgot. This memory isn't for nostalgia, it's the blueprint for restoring order at a higher octave. Empaths are keepers of the coming era's frequency, an age of awareness over belief, presence over performance, resonance over control. When an empath lives authentically, they don't need to preach, their energy speaks. They become a resonance field others can feel, like a peace that has no obvious cause. From there, the world begins to shift, not with revolutions or bloodshed, but through subtle changes in perception. Children arrive more sensitive. The once numb grow uneasy with pretense. Systems that seemed unshakable begin to crack from the inside. This is not divine punishment, it's energetic reflection. As the light of awareness spreads, darkness runs out of places to hide. At the center of this process stands the empath, straddling two worlds, the old world of reflection and the new world of presence. They are the bridge between feeling and wisdom, the human and the soul, the self and the whole. Their task is not to change others, but to keep their frequency steady amid turmoil so that others can synchronize to it. They are like Prometheus, bringing fire to humankind. But unlike the old myth, these empaths carry fire not in their hands, but in their consciousness. And this fire doesn't scorch, it illumines. It belongs to no religion or philosophy. It is the flame of presence itself, the light that appears when we dare to look at everything without turning away. The world now stands at the threshold of unprecedented energetic change. Old power structures are dissolving not because of war, but because they no longer match the rising frequency. Economies built on fear, politics built on division, media built on manipulation, they all tremble under the swell of awareness. Amid this metamorphosis, empaths are the anchor points of light, keeping the planet from sliding into energetic chaos. They are learning a new skill, to be present to truth without being swallowed by it. They neither hide from darkness nor are devoured by it. They stand at the center, where light and shadow reconcile, where compassion is not weakness and boundaries are not cruelty. There, they become the embodiment of what humanity needs most, a balance between knowing and loving. Perhaps when the world learns this, we'll see that empaths aren't special souls, but the prototype of humanity's future, a human who can feel without dissolving, love without possessing, and illuminate without judging. Then the age of mirrors will close, not because the mirrors disappear, but because we recognize that everything outside has always been ourselves in another form. In that moment, light won't come from someone, it will come from everyone. And after millennia of hide and seek with itself, the world will exhale like one waking from a deep dream. Not paradise, not salvation. A return to the natural state of being, where consciousness and energy sing the same song. Chapter 8. The return to center. When awareness becomes creation, there comes a moment in every soul's journey when you no longer ask, "Who am I?" You simply know, not by reasoning, but by stillness. Not because someone told you, but because everything within and around you has fallen into the same rhythm. There are no thunderclaps, no mystical fireworks, only a profound calm, as if you've come home from the soul's longest voyage, the return to center. This center is not in past or future, not at the pole of light or dark, not in victory or defeat. The center is where opposites meet without canceling each other, where light does not banish shadow, but illuminates it, where love does not deny pain, but understands it, where silence does not escape noise, but befriends it. This is the space Jung called the self, the whole I. Beyond ego and unconscious, a human no longer divided, a bridge between earth and the divine. After passing through the trials, confronting the narcissist, meeting one's own shadow, reconciling with the collective darkness, and navigating the maze of reflections, the empath finally realizes every battle was a battle with the self. The narcissist was a projection of what they feared. Society was the magnified architecture of unexamined collective fears. The mirrored world was doing its only job, reflecting us to ourselves. The return to center begins not with action, but with ceasing the wrong actions. We stop running, stop proving, stop trying to be better, stop treating healing as an endless project. We quit searching for light, because we see that light isn't found. It is the nature of awareness. What must be found is the part of us that hasn't dared to face that light. From center, energy moves differently. The smallest things become sacred. A breath is meditation. A drop of water reflects the cosmos. The empath no longer reads energy. They are energy. They no longer feel primarily with emotion, but with presence. They no longer heal with words, but with the frequency of their being. Here, awareness and creation unite. Consciousness becomes the true creative instrument. The universe doesn't bend to thoughts alone, but to the frequency of knowing. When you know you are enough, you don't need to plead for abundance. The world adjusts to mirror it. When you know you are safe, fear in your environment softens. When you know love is the nature of life, you no longer look for someone to love you. Everything around you begins to resonate with love. This isn't mere philosophy. It's spiritual physics. Human awareness is not a spectator, but a formative field. We are not dust motes in a vast universe. We are the universe in self-aware form. When the empath returns to center, they realize their task was never to heal others, but to become the tuning note to which the world can align. Like the first string tuned in an orchestra, it doesn't coerce the others. It simply rings true, and the ensemble naturally harmonizes. The center is that string. When an empath rests there, the world around them begins to arrange itself without effort, intervention, or rescue. It answers to frequency. Reaching center doesn't mean we never drift. We are feeling beings. Vibration is natural. You will still feel anger, fear, confusion. But instead of labeling these as failures, the centered one sees each deviation as part of the return, like a pendulum whose swing generates life. Center is not immobility, it is the capacity to come back. In center, the empath perceives the dual nature of existence. The cosmos is not only light, but a dance of poles. No day without night, no love without fear, no awakening without forgetting. What once hurt now pulses as the heartbeat of wholeness. They stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and smile. "Ah, so this is how my soul expands." Compassion also transforms. It is no longer soft pity, but lucid love. They can look at a manipulator with gentle eyes, not to excuse harm, but because they see the ignorance beneath the act. They understand that every soul, however distorted the method, is trying to return to its own center. In that seeing, enemies and victims fall away, leaving only people fumbling toward home. True forgiveness is born here. No longer an act, but a natural state of understanding. Forgiveness is not "I absolve you," but "I recognize our common source." When you understand, forgiveness doesn't need a name. Life simply continues. In this state, the empath becomes a conscious creator. They know each word, thought, and feeling is a broadcast into reality's field. They begin to live by intention, not as a plan, but as a frequency of choice. When they speak from awareness. When they are silent from love. Each act becomes a form of spiritual art. Here the idea of the final mask reaches its ultimate meaning. All masks of light and shadow, good and bad, savior and victim fall away. No more roles, no fixed identity. The empath is no longer an empath. They are fully human, one who can love, understand, create, and be still. At center, life becomes simple. There is no need to assert your worth, you are its embodiment. No need to hunt for a mission, living truthfully is mission enough. No need to chase meaning, this moment is meaning. The center is not a destination, it's the place we never left, only forgot. When we remember, the world changes not because the world is different, but because the gaze is. Seen with whole awareness, division dissolves. Trees, people, mountains, rain, light, laughter, tears, everything is one current in countless forms. No higher or lower, inside or outside, only the universe appearing in each breath. Then the empath becomes a conscious artist of energy. No longer victim to currents, they can steer them. No longer swept by feeling, they use feeling as paint. They repaint the world with their vibration. A peaceful glance can melt anger. A truthful word can touch the unconscious. A loving gesture can alter a room. This is where awareness and action become one, where perception itself is doing, and doing is meditation. There is no split between spiritual and ordinary, inner and outer, me and world. You pour a cup of tea, and in the way the water rises, the universe savors itself. Returning to center doesn't make you superhuman. It makes you deeply human. You will still laugh and grieve and tremble, but none of it defines you. Emotions move like waves and you are the water. Stories change like wind and you are the sky. Everything continues, but there is no one left to be harmed. When you step back into the world, no one knows you have awakened. You don't speak of it, you don't need to. You simply live. And those who meet you feel something. They relax, tell the truth, smile more easily. They don't know why, only that they feel safe because you are the safe feel they sought in 100 other faces. The world is turning because of such souls, not preachers, not persuaders, not those who spread good vibes, but those whose honesty is so complete that their presence is light. There is no empath and narcissist, no awake and asleep, only souls at different chapters of the same homecoming. When awareness becomes creation, we return to our true role, co-creators with the universe, no longer resisting life, but moving in time with it. No longer fearing change, but recognizing change as love's permanent form. No longer trying to hold the light, but understanding that light exists only as it is shared not by effort, but by being true. Thus the circle closes not as an ending, but as a return to the beginning at a higher turn. The empath who walked through the narcissist's night, their own shadow, the collective darkness and the maze of reflections now stands at center where light and shadow bow to one another, remembering they were never two. Here, consciousness no longer strives to understand. It simply creates. It no longer asks, "What must I do?" It knows, "I am." And in that am, the universe keeps breathing, singing, and unfolding through you, with you, as you. And then, when every chapter has closed and the final masks have fallen, only silence remains. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of something understood to its very end. No one left to fight, nothing left to prove, no fear left to conquer. Everything simply is plain and absolute. The empath, the soul who has weathered so many emotional storms, who once carried others' pain as if it were their own skin, now stands in the stillness of awareness. No more echoes of the past, no more faces that once made them tremble. All has become memory not to be forgotten, but to understand that everything that ever happened was a road home. In this quiet, they realize awakening is not a destination, but the natural state when we stop resisting life. Every pain, every loss, every betrayal that once seemed senseless now reveals itself as perfect. Each wound opened a window. Each collapse was a rite of rebirth. And all those once called narcissists were simply soul friends, bearing the hardest role, the role that forced you to see yourself. This silence is not a void. It is the ground of all sound. Within it you hear the universe breathing, the whisper of the soul, the heartbeat of every star. Everything is connected in an invisible web, and you suddenly understand you were never separate from the sacred. From here, there is no boundary between within and without, between me and them. When you look at the one who hurt you, you no longer see an enemy. You see a soul also struggling to find the light, still lost in their own shadow. And in that seeing, compassion arises not because you are good, but because you understand. That is when you realize true forgiveness needs no words. It doesn't come from effort, but from the dissolving of the wall between understanding and love. Forgiveness doesn't mean permission, nor does it mean forgetting. It is the return of flow, so energy can move freely, so life can continue to unfold. In this state, you no longer try to be positive. You don't need to. Your light doesn't come from denying the dark, but from embracing it. When you look at your own shadow and say, "I see you," the darkness doesn't fade because it's banished, but because at last it is loved. Here is where true love begins. No longer the shape of infatuation, rescue, or need. No more giving or receiving. It simply is. It is life's rhythm, the current of energy moving through every form, the connection among all that exists. In the silence, you realize you never truly lost anyone. You were never truly betrayed. You were moving through successive reflections of yourself, then removing them one layer at a time. The empath is not a victim of narcissists. They are a gatekeeper of awareness. They pass through darkness not to be swallowed, but to bring light where light has never reached. What once was suffering becomes treasure. Tears once mistaken for failure become a baptism. And each wound, instead of proving weakness, becomes evidence of the soul's courage to feel, to love, to exist in a world afraid of love. At this point, words grow unnecessary. All that is truly sacred lies beyond language. Your presence becomes the message. Your eyes become a prayer. Your stillness becomes a healing force. When you sit quietly, the world senses that frequency and attunes, not with the mind, but with the soul. You begin to see beauty in little things. Sunlight slipping through leaves, a child's laughter, a stranger's embrace, the clean breath of morning. You realize happiness is not a destination, but presence. When you are truly here in each second, each moment, you see that everything is a miracle. When you no longer need to change the world begins to change. Not because you force it, but because you have become a frequency the world cannot help but answer. True light never has to prove itself, it only needs to appear, and darkness disperses on its own. Here is the final secret. When you stop seeking the light, you become the light. When you stop running from the dark, you become the place where both become one. When you stop asking, "What must I do to heal?" you realize you were never truly broken. Your soul was learning to remember its original wholeness. Awakening is not climbing higher, but returning deeper. Not seeking transcendence, but learning to be present with your own humanity, with tears, with laughter, with contradiction, with the ongoing practice of love. And then, after all the philosophies, rituals, and journeys, only one simple thing remains. You sit, you breathe, you smile. Not because everything is perfect, but because you see that even imperfection is a form of perfection. You no longer ask the universe for answers, because your very existence is the answer. This silence is where every journey begins, and where every journey ends. In it, the empath is no longer the seeker of light, but the light itself illuminating the world, not with words, but with presence. And when you step into the world with that frequency, without speaking, without trying, the world will recognize it. Not with the mind, but with the soul. They will look into your eyes and remember what they had forgotten, that they too are light. And so the circle closes, not with applause, but with a deep breath, not with a farewell speech, but with a silent knowing. Everything has been, is, and will always be exactly where it belongs. You no longer need to search for the light, because you are the light, dreaming you are human.